Hi, I'm Kaya.
And I'm Joanna.
And this is Starlit Citadel Reviews.
Bruges is a colorful, card-based strategy game from Stefan Feld and Z-Man Games.
In Bruges, players are powerful merchants vying for influence over the medieval Belgian city while defending themselves from external threats. It's playable by 2 to 4 people in about 1 hour. The expansion, The City on the Zwin, adds a 5th player and then has a number of independent rules modules that let you modify the cards, actions, and strategy of the base game.
Players begin Bruges by placing the board on the table and putting the statue tiles on it in a stack with the highest valued tile on top. The cards are split into 5 stacks, and then a number of stacks equal to the number of players are shuffled together and divided evenly between the card trays. Any remaining cards are set aside.
Each player collects 2 seals, 2 player tokens, and 3 majority markers in their color. The small seal is placed on the guardhouse in front of them, and the player tokens are placed on the town hall and the 5th space of the scoring track. The majority markers are kept face down. The workers, guilders, threat markers, and other tokens are sorted and placed on the table. Each player collects 1 worker of each color and 5 guilders, and a starting player is chosen. Then the game begins.
Each round of Bruges has 4 phases: drawing cards, rolling dice, taking actions, and verifying majorities. During the first phase, players take turns drawing up to a hand of 5 cards. They can use both draw piles.
In phase 2, the starting player rolls the dice and then places them on the board in ascending order. For each die showing a 5 or 6, 1 threat marker of the matching color is dealt to each player. If a player gets their 3rd threat of the same color, they immediately suffer the consequences on the marker's back and return all markers of that color to the pool. Threats may cost you all of your workers or guilders, or force you to discard something you've built.
Players also have the chance to advance 1 step on the reputation track by paying a number of guilders equal to the total of all the dice on the table numbering a 1 or a 2. If there are no dice on the table with a 1 or a 2 on them, then you cannot advance your reputation this round.
In phase 3, players take turns playing 1 of the cards from their hand and taking 1 of 6 possible actions. They may discard a card to collect 2 workers of its color, or a number of guilders equal to the color's die value. They may discard a card to remove a threat tile of the matching color, and they earn 1 point.
They may discard a card of a color matching one of the 2 rectangles next to their guard tower in order to build a section of canal. They must also pay the amount in guilders shown on the space they are building. Once one of the 2 sections of a player's canal is 3 spaces long, they will earn 3 points at the end of the game. If they complete a section, they collect the top statue tile from the stack.
A player can play their card face down in front of themselves to build a house. They must also spend 1 worker of the matching color. If the player has an empty house, they may recruit a person of any color by placing their card face up onto the house and paying the cost listed in its upper left.
People can be activated on a player's turn to grant them the bonus or ability that their card lists. A person with the arrow icon is activated once when their card is first played. A person with a worker icon can be activated once per round by spending a worker of the indicated color. A person with the infinity icon is activated at the time their card lists. Each person also belongs to one of 11 groups indicated by a separate icon.
Players take turns playing cards and taking actions until every player has played 4 cards. In phase 4, players compare their reputation scores, total number of people, and total number of canal sections. The player with the most of each one turns over the related majority tile, and these tiles remain flipped face up for the rest of the game. Finally, the starting player token is passed clockwise, and the next round begins.
The game ends at the end of the round in which the draw piles run out. Any remaining draws are made from the extra cards that were set aside at the beginning of the game. Players then compare their point totals. They add in points from statue tiles, majority tiles, reputation track, people, and any canals that they've built. Also, they get 1 point for every house, and any people that have the laurel icon will probably give them points at the end of the game. The player with the most points wins.
So Bruges to me is a really good example of an accessible, very family-oriented Eurogame. There's nothing particularly unusual or unique about Bruges, but what it does set out to do, it does very well, and it's a solid example of the genre. One of the things that I absolutely love about it is the cleanness of the visual design. Not only is this a very pretty game, but every visual design element is there to support your learning of the rules and your understanding of it. The rules in this game are very simple and you can learn them very quickly, but because they're also very well integrated into the components, everything's marked on the board very clearly, there's a place for everything, you've even got the trays for the cards, you're not gonna find yourself going back to the rule book very often, which means that the game can really start to flow and move well very, very quickly, which is great because it means that you can get down to the strategizing rather than trying to remember how you're supposed to count things or how many threats are actually a problem, because it's all there visually. You know, the threats will make a perfect circle when you have too many of them, and you can tell just by a quick glance around the table what the game state is, who's doing well, who's not, and what you're supposed to be doing next. It's a really beautiful design, and it makes it much more accessible than it otherwise could be. I also really like how the game forces a balance between, on the one hand, pursuing points and working towards victory, and on the other hand, balancing negative consequences. The threats are not necessarily the hardest thing to counter, but they can definitely get away from you if you stop paying attention to them for a round or two. And they add this really nice sense of urgency and of pacing and of a little bit of nervousness because, you know, what if you risked not dealing with a threat because you really wanted to play a card for something else and you're just watching that die roll and hoping that a 5 or a 6 doesn't come up. It does add to the tension and the atmosphere of the game, and it also forces players to balance their attention on multiple fronts, which makes it a lot more interesting and engaging. Now, one weakness that I find in the design, which is a little bit disappointing, is that this game isn't really friendly to colorblind players. Colors are hugely important in Bruges. They're not just there for the visual appeal. How you make choices and what choices are even available to you are largely determined by the colors of different elements, by the dice, the workers, the cards, and the little canal tiles. And none of them have unique symbols that would help you differentiate between them. They're identical in every way except for the color. And that does mean that this game could be less accessible to a certain subset of players, which is really unfortunate. Another thing that is a lot more a matter of taste, but is definitely worth being aware of, is that by the standards of Eurogames, Bruges has a very high element of luck to it. The die rolls do definitely set the tone for each round of the game. They have a significant impact on a lot of the options that you have available to you. And the cards, which are the core of your actions, are pretty much completely randomized. The fact that you've got 2 draw piles to choose from does mean that you have some control over which colors of cards you end up with, but what's on their faces is completely random. And because the synergies and the interactions between those cards will often form the meat of your strategy, it does mean that it's very difficult to plan ahead multiple turns without knowing what you're going to end up with. This is really great for new players that are just getting a handle on strategy and want to take things a couple turns at a time. It's really nice for letting people catch up if they've fallen behind a bit. Maybe the cards or the dice will be in your favor. But if you're the kind of gamer that likes to have open information and likes to be able to plan their game from start to finish and just execute the strategy smoothly, it's not going to work for you as well as other titles might.
So something else to be aware of when you're buying Bruges or playing with a group of people is that interaction is going to be very low. Now, this is a complaint that happens with a lot of Euro games. The fact that sort of you'll figure out your strategy, you'll figure out which way you're going to go to get your points, and then you pretty much just do it, and no one else at the table can really interrupt what you're doing. There are very few ways that you can sort of throw a wrench in someone else's plan. So you are going to find that interactivity is quite low here. Another complaint that could come with this game is that the theme is quite pasted on and a little bit dry. And now this is a complaint, again, that comes along with a lot of Euro games. It's about the mechanics here. It's about the earning of the points. The theme itself, even though it's quite nicely realized in terms of art and color, and there are sort of nice choices being made here with sort of the people cards, and there's a picture of each one, and they each have a job, those elements really don't tie into the mechanics at all. Even though those people have a job and a portrait, their special ability really doesn't have anything to do with those things. It's basically just an element that's washed over this entire game to give it a theme. But those thematic elements aren't going to affect the way that you play, and they really don't tie into the mechanics at all. However, like Kaya was saying, this game does a lot of things well. Again, you're out here to get points, but there are a lot of different ways that you can get those points. There's a lot of different paths to victory here. There's a lot of ways that you can try to get ahead of the other players at the table, and it doesn't seem like any one particular path is the right choice. So it's not like once you figure out this game, you get it every time. No, there's a bunch of different ways that you can play it, a bunch of different ways that you can get those points, and it seems like, they're all pretty neck and neck, which is really interesting and adds to the replayability of it, for sure. Also, there's a lot of interesting tactics that come in with the card synergies. So every time you play, you may end up sort of figuring out a new way to make your cards work together and get some sort of mini engines going on the table in front of you, which is going to add sort of a more strategic element to this game. And it's a little bit random because every time you get a new hand of cards, you don't know what exactly you're going to get, and you have to figure out ways to make those cards work together. And that's interesting to me. I find that an interesting element to this game. So generally, I think if you like Eurogaming, you're going to like this game. It's well designed, it's very pretty, it's nicely laid out, very easy to learn. So if you're a Eurogamer and you want to get your friends into Eurogaming, maybe this would be a really nice choice for them. So I think this is a very solid choice. If you know that this is the kind of game that you like, definitely give it a try. And maybe you could even invite somebody who isn't so into this kind of game, and they're going to have a good time too. Just because it is so nicely designed and so easy to learn and laid out so beautifully.
In the Deluxe Edition, the statues are made of chocolate. No, I'm kidding.